Hey everyone, Kunik here, back with another RPG horror story for you today. Now just a heads up, today's video is actually a collaboration with Z Flacco. So as this video is part 1, when it's over, there will be a link to go to part 2 so you can check out his video. In today's story, we have yet another reminder that experience in D&D does not necessarily translate to being a good player. So with that said, let's roll for initiative and begin the story. So, I'm in a 5e campaign with guys at my local university. They're mostly uni kids, and, sad as I am to say it, despite being almost a decade older than them, I've got the same emotional maturity. Yeah, Asperger's and all that. But that's not what this is about. The oldest member of our group, because he's a teaching assistant here and looks to be late 30s, early 40s, is by far the most experienced member of our party, having played D&D for decades. We appreciated his insights into things and how it helps us to handle technical situations. But a few months in, and we are starting to see problems. To preface, he's playing a Paladin, and our group has been traveling together for a long while by this point. So we should feel comfortable and trusting around one another. We've entered a city of thieves that my character is native to, and knows well enough all the dangers and advises people on what not to do. The Paladin hasn't made too much of a fuss about the city, and since that's in character for a Paladin, I roll with it. I just caution him to not do things that will draw attention to us. Granted, we all kind of suck at that, but it's the thought that counts. In our first day there, I realize there's this thieving competition going on in the city, where 100 specially crafted letters/envelopes have been distributed around the place, and competitors need to collect as many of these in a week in order to be made a noble for a day. Remembering the last time this happened, I warn the rest of the players that we really don't want to get involved in this in any way, lest we make targets of ourselves. Of course, that's when one of our members gets taken captive by one potential competitor, who thinks that they have a letter. Well, obviously, that's not going to stand, and we beat him up. But then the Paladin uses his loud, booming voice that draws attention from a crowd in the streets. On top of which, said competitor has one of those letters. Already knowing what's inside of it based on the seal, I desperately warn the Paladin to not open it, reiterating that that's exactly the same thing used by the thieving competition, and that we'd all get marked having it, let alone opening it. He makes a very iffy statement that he has to look to see if there's actually orders to attack us from one of our enemies, completely disregarding any advice I have on the matter. Fearing the worst, I try to take the envelope out of his hands, so he raises out of my reach, but into perfect view of the crowd gathering around us, and then blames me for making him raise it into the air. Now everyone knows. This, I feel, is the first warning sign. Now this is the part where things get really tense. We have this magic cloak of dark elf origin, which we let the Paladin put into his knapsack, rather than using the sorcerer's bag of holding, which he's sharing the internal space of for another player to use. The cloak's evil and all, which is why the Paladin really wants to destroy it, par for the course. However, we got no clue how to do that. Paladin suggests that, since there's drow and cronies after the drow cloak, that he puts the cloak in the bag of holding and that he hold on to the bag of holding instead of the sorcerer. Keep in mind, we all have about one magic item each around this time, and this bag was the sorcerer's. So our sorcerer in character wasn't feeling convinced of this argument, even though the player did. Paladin reiterates that he will only temporarily keep the bag of holding until the cloak is destroyed, but since we have no idea when we'll find the means to do so, that's effectively indefinite. And on top of that, nothing would really stop anyone from stealing the bag of holding either. When Sorcerer points out that it's still his property, you'd think this would be the end of it, but you'd be wrong. Because at this point, on the Discord, the Paladin's player began writing up these long paragraphs/essays talking about how the party needs to have a discussion about how to distribute party items and loot. Also keep in mind that so far, everything we've gotten, meager as they are, we've shared among each other, and we've respected each other's stuff enough to ask about it. So why Paladin wants to appropriate the Sorcerer's bag of holding when it doesn't really reduce the odds of preventing people from stealing it is kind of odd. To make his long butt argument short, he thinks that we need to put item/loot distribution to a vote of who gets it, based on what's best for the party. He goes about wording how, if we stick to the status quo, it'll just be a chaotic, free-for-all frenzy for loot. And that leaving the bag of holding in the Sorcerer's hands would mean he would deny us the use of whatever items we've placed in the bag. When I said that I was in favor of just leaving things be, he then told me that he would be well within his rights to pick up items useful to my rogue and deny their use for me. I mean, sure, he could, but that would only serve to prove that he was a dick. At this point, Sorcerer is concerned that the Paladin doesn't actually trust any of us if he's using this reasoning. Which is ironic, since I'm the paranoid one in and out of character. Paladin tries to get people in the Discord to vote on things, which only a few of us voice opinions without voting and the rest don't respond. So we're kind of expecting this to blow up by the next time we go to session. Still not satisfied, Paladin player tries to get the GM to make a decision here. To which GM says that he's not getting involved, and that we should do this in character and avoid toxicity. I can only assume that Paladin is getting more desperate, as after this, he makes up 3 different votes for us to choose from, 2 of which essentially boil down to the same thing, whether or not loot is party property to distribute, or if loot is sole property of those who get it first and dependent on them to share. The third one was about player versus player policy, and whether there would be any or not. Hint, we've never had this happen. At all. Ever. And yes, they were long butt blocks of paragraphs, with biased wording in favor of his choice of things, and disfavoring the other. Since no one really responded to these votes, session came up, and when we saw Paladin's player, he doesn't even greet us. He's just got this stony, serious face, not talking until we get into the room and practically immediately tries to force us to vote on this. I mentioned that he can't just unilaterally decide if we're having a vote, to which he essentially responds with, "That's why we're having a vote." When some of us say that we're not comfortable voting for this sort of thing, seeing as how things so far have been fine, he says that he will mark us as abstaining so that his sole vote will win. Given that choice, we all voted to retain the status quo, to which he stayed silent and sulked for an hour or 2, barely paying attention to the GM or interacting with the players, finding it more interesting to look at the drywall. Eventually, he got out of that funk and joined in on the fun, though we noticed he started playing with a more aggressive approach when the rest of the party wanted subterfuge, making me suspect he may be acting vindictively because of his lost vote. Turns out, he still continued to be passive-aggressive with other players who don't agree with his interpretations or plans, namely me and the Sorcerer, and would also attempt to hide under in-character speaking to not have to respond to our out-of-character concerns. Whenever he posts, it's always in public, asking about our opinions. Almost always long blocks of text, enough for an essay, and if we do offer comments that don't agree with him, he's quick to say that he's asking the GM and not us, so we should butt out. Sorcerer tells him in a private message that maybe he should just PM the Game Master if he's not looking for other people's opinion. Paladin responds that he could just block the Sorcerer on Discord, because that would be just as effective. Now, normally it might be simple to just rid ourselves of this guy under normal circumstances, but he is the one who holds the keys to the only rooms we have available on campus. And with the pandemic occurring, he's the one who made the online Roll20 room, so he has host/GM privileges while we are in lockdown. Yeah, we're dealing with that guy. End post. Alright everyone, that wraps up part 1 to this story. I'll be brief on my comments so that you can go and watch part 2 on Zflocko's channel. I think the #1 red flag going into this, above anything we saw in this entire post, was at the very end. He's the only one with the keys to the room on campus, and he's the one who made the Roll20 room. Ideally, at least for the latter, you'd want the GM to be the one who did that. So, secretly, I would try to migrate away from that. Have the GM make a new Roll20 room where he gets everything set up exactly as it should be, because in reality this is his game, he should be the one hosting it, not this guy. As for the campus situation, that's a tough one. I've never actually dealt with an on-campus D&D group, so my only suggestion is that maybe they can move it to one of their dorms or find some other space. For instance, a lot of game shops near me have plenty of space for D&D groups, and they let you do it if you ask someone in charge if you can use it for a 4 or so hour D&D session. A perfectly good alternative to having to rely on this guy for anything. Anyhow, that wraps it up for this post. Here's a link to check out part 2 from Z Flacco, or you can check it out in the description if you'd rather go there. Anyhow, as always, the source of the video is in the description below, and if you like the story and you want to see more videos just like this one, be sure to hit that subscribe button and bell notification icon in order to be notified of my future videos. And as about 80% of you watching are not subscribed, it would be doing me a huge favor for you to do so in order to help keep the community growing. Anyhow, while you wait for my future videos, here are a few related videos that you can watch from my channel in the meantime.